the US, pretty much all of the states do restrict the voting rights of people convicted of certain crimes in some way or another. The two exceptions are Vermont and Maine. So Vermont and Maine do not restrict the voting rights of anybody for committing crimes or anything like that. Okay. But the other 48 states do, right? And in fact, some states end up restricting the rights of people convicted of crimes in pretty dramatic ways. So together, throughout these other 48 states, there's approximately 5.85 million US citizens who are ineligible to vote because of these various restrictions on criminal voting. So 5.85 million US citizens. And it's not often, a lot of people don't know about this, but this actually depends on the laws of the different states. And different states have dramatically different policies regarding who is eligible to vote and whether or not a criminal conviction is a disqualification from voting. So I want just to very quickly walk through, in very broad terms, this sort of like patchwork of regulations that pops up throughout the US. Okay, so start here. Typically, people who are currently incarcerated in prison for a felony conviction are not allowed to vote. So in most of the states, this is true, that people who are serving prison time for felony convictions cannot vote. Some states restrict this slightly differently. So some states, it's not about any felony conviction. It's about specifically violent felonies. Or some states will have a specific set of offenses that are disenfranchisable offenses. So Alabama, for example, has a list of crimes involving moral turpitude. And the crimes involving moral turpitude are disenfranchisable offenses, but other felonies are not. Illinois is an interesting example. In Illinois, any offense, whether it's a felony or even a misdemeanor, if you're serving time in prison or jail for any legal infraction, you are not permitted to vote in the state of Illinois. Okay. So even though it seems like 48 states are unified in this way, the details are slightly more complex than that. But they get even more complex. So some states, many states, do not allow probationers or parolees to vote. So the states here in purple, in these states, in the dark purple, the inmates and parolees cannot vote. And in the dark blue states, in addition to inmates and parolees, people on probation are not allowed to vote. Okay. And so, as many of you might know, so there's prison terms, and then there's these other sorts of community supervision, where people serving parole and probation are watched over by the state in various ways and restricted by the state in various ways. And these are considered parts of the sentence, and they can go on for years after somebody is released from prison, or they can occur instead of prison in some cases. So some states restrict voting to people serving those types of sentences too. Some states restrict voting rights even further in a variety of complex ways. Some states do not allow some or all ex-felons to vote, or require special approval to regain the right to vote post-sentence. And so this is post the entire sentence, including probation and parole. Once again, this is complex. Some restrict this to violent ex-felons, so people who have finished their sentence for violent felonies. Others, once again, have sort of different classifications. The moral turpitude thing in Alabama is still in play here. The laws here are really variable from state to state. Some say have a waiting period, that after you finish your sentence, or after you finish the important parts of your sentence, you can vote after, say, 2 to 5 years. Right. And in some of those states, the voting rights are just automatically triggered again. So once you finish that waiting period, you automatically get your right to vote back. Other states require you to sort of jump through special administrative hoops in order to regain your right to vote. And sometimes these hoops can be pretty difficult. So in Florida and Iowa and Kentucky, for example, in principle, it's possible to be disenfranchised for life. If you write to the governor for clemency or for a pardon to regain your civil rights, the governor can say no, right? And there might not be clear guidelines for when governors say yes or no. And so in principle, in some of these states, once you've committed a felony or a violent felony, you could lose your right to vote for the rest of your life, even after you've completed all the other components of the sentence. I think it's Mississippi is an interesting case. One of the ways you can get your right back to vote is to approach your state representative, your representative in the state legislature, and then that representative can write a bill specifically about you with your name in it to try to get your civil rights back. And then that bill has to go through the whole state legislative process. And if it's signed into law, then you can get your individual rights back. So that's a sort of special case. In Mississippi, you can also seek clemency or pardon from the governor in order to get your rights back. But in some of these states, this process can be pretty daunting. Okay.